Hello and welcome to the Friday wrap up here on Landy's Crypto Corner, powered by the Goxstein News Network. Today is June 6th, 2025, and we're looking at a close up view of Bitcoin's price action on the daily and the very clear and obvious head and shoulders. Now, Bitcoin did hit our downside targets and even played out one of the scenarios that I posited fairly recently in the past couple of weeks here that we've been up here and hit the target at 112. And that is the move down below 104 to the 101 level and look out for a swing of the 100,700. If we don't see a close below it, then as long as Bitcoin is closing back above the 101 area, 101 200 or so, then looking good. Not too much to worry about in that regard. Now, the head and shoulders pattern is something that is concerning to many in the market right now, and there's some pretty clear criteria to kind of point out to you about. I don't know, head and shoulders in bull markets, they tend to work out about 50% of the time, I think, as of the most recent statistics that I was looking up. And in this case, there is the possibility of a throwback. And when I'm talking about a throwback, that is where the head and shoulders pattern fails to play out and you get a throwback back to the head. And of course, there is some downside targets depending on how you're measuring it, if it does play out as a head and shoulders. But let's get into it. We got our swing that we were looking for. We got the close, meeting the criteria of closing back above the 101, 101, 200 area here. Got the nice swing of the 100,700 low on an eventful news day. And many, were positing that, oh no, this is because of the Elon Trump spat online. And it really had nothing to do with that. We already talked about this lower high. Any trading below the lower first here and the $104,000 level, especially, that 1272, we're looking down right to that 101 level and looking for a possible swing of 100,700. If we saw any closures below there, that's, if we didn't already head lower, that's where we would be looking at some of the lower targets. Now, if we do end up seeing this play out as a throwback to the head, what is the criteria? Let's take out the last lower high. That hasn't changed. 106,900 or $107,000, basically back above the basis band, gives price action a chance to head on up to the 109, 110 region by the lower high here, and then start working its way back towards the upper second and the higher high up there where the all-time high is 110 to 112. So essentially, how would we, start to determine whether or not this is likely to at least give it a try to take out the high at the 106.9, 107 area? If we start to see even lower term timeframes trade back above 106, it's very highly likely that we're going to see, price and the bulls try to make a run for that high, that last lower high at 106.9, 107. If we see any closures above there, it's pretty much confirmed. That would be a trend break, and, watch price play out from there. We would set criteria, obviously, for a failure, but also, the criteria for moving back up towards that upper first, somewhere around the 109 level, to the prior all-time high over here at 109,360. And then, of course, it's kind of an area of interest between 110 to 112. You could almost take this zone of interest as a 108 to 110 on any closes above that 107 region as an area of interest overhead. And then, of course, any breakout above the upper second there, which is currently at 111,300 or so, we would start to see expansion again for the Bollinger Band set here, but we would need to see additional criteria of closing above the 112 all-time high in order to kick off that expansion on a close over close basis, especially what we would need to see for the, basically the next leg up. And, then we start looking towards those deeper targets. Of course, one of the bigger overall targets We'll get into, if we start to see this play out, I'll start getting into some of the medium-term targets. But one of the bigger long-term targets, obviously, being the 1414 up here at the 128 to $130,000 level. There's also some major volatility levels of interest and other fib pulls that are interesting slightly above there as well. And on a breakdown, if this does play out as a head and shoulders pattern, yes, there's a target. I'm not a pattern guy, not really that interested in patterns myself, but when they're obvious like this, many people are going to pay attention to them. And in this case, if we see now the low taken out at about 100,000, 345, 350, that would put Bitcoin below the lower second, below the area of interest for support and resistance. And then, of course, taking out the low would put Bitcoin rather into an expansive posture down towards the 98 to the top side of the candle structures over here at $95,000, bracketing the point of control here around $96,000. Anywhere below there, we're looking right back to the weekly higher low and a close. This is the last higher low on the weekly on a closing basis at 93.5. That is kind of where the rubber meets the road, in my opinion, for some of the longer term time frames. But in this case, 93 to 93.5, depending on if you're going to take some of those swings below it, is kind of the big area to pay attention to on any breach below the top side of the candles here around $95,000. So anywhere below there, right back to the bottom side of the range, 92 to 88.7 by the 1.168. And of course, let's go back in time a little bit and remind ourselves of the importance of the macro fib extension on log scale. Post expansion out of the prior range, we had a close open right at that 16.8% above the prior cycle high at $69,000 when using a log fib pull from 69 to the bear market low at 15.5. We saw the close open come in right there, and then subsequently saw another higher low on that move come in right there and try to base out. This defined the range between the range lows essentially for quite some time before the breakdown over here, around 88.7 to that $92,000 region, where we saw a closing higher low come in. We saw all the swings come in there. Once we started to get closures in there, retest, break down, close below, retest, break down, so on and so forth. So, that would be kind of danger zone for the bulls if it did start to break to the downside there. To the upside, obviously, I just talked about, regain 106, take out 107. That's a trend break. That also puts into play a technical throwback to the head, on the board at the very minimum. Any closes above the upper second and, of course, the all-time high, we're hitting expansion. We want to see close over close price momentum start to pick up above there in an expansive phase to start the next leg up. And I know that there's a lot of fear in the markets, in particular surrounding news. The market is not trading based off of Elon and Trump's posts on social media or comments in the media. So that's kind of, nobody's selling their Bitcoin voluntarily because they're like, oh no, Elon and Trump are fighting. That's just not happening. I know it's a fun narrative to entertain, but it's actually, that's not happening. There's obviously been people who are forced liquidated. We know of a few. James is going to have to change his wallet name to James Lost at some point here in the future if he keeps making really, really awful trades like that. But I think many people know my thoughts on that particular situation. It doesn't sit right with me. Either way, let's take a look at a few things here. We had the bearish divergence that has now played out, especially with the bounce yesterday. That would be the Friday candle. There's no immediate signals for, RSI here. If a low is set, where would it be set? In this case, technically speaking, it would be above the Friday high at 105,440 here. That would solidify the closing low and then start to target 106 and above. It hasn't got there, and try to go for that downtrend break at 107. Now, the big thing here that I am keeping an eye on, especially over the weekend, if we see the 101, essentially if we see 101 hold as support on a closing basis, things are looking pretty good for the bulls, that's for sure. Momentum has a chance to actually get a full-on signal here as well. This is a regular Stoch, not a Stoch RSI. Stoch RSI measures the velocity of RSI. A regular Stoch measures close over close price momentum. 103.8, so essentially 103.8 to 104, which is, of course, the top side here of our zone of interest, right? That is being tested kind of right now almost by the 104 region here, and the 1272 or 27.2% above the prior cycle highs. And that is the area that you want to see hold up to keep momentum turn to the upside here, get a full-on momentum shift. But it doesn't mean much if we're still in a downtrend. So we do need to see a downtrend break following that, or a higher low, maybe another little bit of a weekend price action where it puts in a lower swing high and then a higher low or something like that could start to set that off. Big thing here over this weekend to kind of pay attention to is, the close on the weekly. And, I'm keeping the zones of interest up here for reference for a little bit here. You can see that they're marked out on the side here. If you need to pause the video and take a look at those levels, you're more than welcome to. But closes below the 103.1 would set this as a closing high on the weekly. We do have the swing high already set as of last week's closure. We do not have the closing high set. So no matter what, even if it was to set here or higher, it's going to be a higher high swing, higher high close, right? So the more likely outcome of any kind of a high being set is a higher low, whether that is in a swing or a closing basis. And the swing can come all in one candle on a swing. So understand that that is something that we do need to consider. Closing above the upper first, of course, would also be closing above that 103.100. That is the preferred area. And of course, that is right where Bitcoin is hanging out, right at the top side here, just under 104 is that upper first standard deviation at 103.360. So that puts it above the swing low from last week. And, nothing doing for the bears unless they start closing under there and get some momentum down below 101 and start to take out this week's current low. And in this case, if it did, then we can start looking down towards that 98 to 95 with the $96,000 point of control area. Anywhere below there, you see the basis band coming in right on the weekly higher low structure over here on a closing basis at 93.5. Bulls would need to hold that. That would not be great if they did lose that. Of course, to be the bottom side of the range. Anywhere below there, look where the lower first is. It's on that daily candle at $85,000. So it's one of the bigger wick lows. And in fact, so I can remind some people of why that wick low is important. That wick low is that swing low for the daily here at $85,000 is that same candle that close opened right on the 1.168 or 16.8% above the prior high, where we then saw the higher low come in subsequently thereafter, a little bit of consolidation and the move up to the new all-time highs that were solidified at the 108,400 area. I believe that was 108,400. Yeah, 108,388. So important area on the daily, acted as an inflection point and a bit of a point of control when price was trading down here. Deviated, stalled out, and then we saw once it was regained, test the 88.7, move through it, tested the weekly higher low, move through it, test the point of control, deviate it, came back to the weekly at 93.5, and then move up zone by zone. So it's actually super clean. Really easy trading. Bitcoin it just trades so damn clean. Now, for the weekly, again, 103.1 is where the bulls want to see closes above. And then, of course, gain that 106, take out this week's high at 107 and continue back to the top side here. You can see that the upper second standard deviation is just above the all-time high there at 112.750. Now, that will move up. And in fact, the upper third up here is going to move up on any closures above the upper first standard deviation. And the further above it that we see the close, well, the more expansion will likely get on the upper second, upper third. I would expect, the upper thirds are around $120,000. I've mentioned this before last week and the week before that, above that 112, I'm looking at, generally speaking, on the daily 112 to 115 is a zone. You can probably take 115 to 120 as a zone above there, but likely 118 to 120, and then anywhere above there, we're looking for full on expansion up to that 1414 at 128 to 130. So that would be 41% above the prior cycle high when utilizing log scale fib pull from the prior cycle high to the bear market low. Now, weekly is in the overbought area for a regular stoke. Now, this is typically where we see the biggest moves, as in the overbought and oversold zones for a regular stochastic momentum indicator. It's not always the case, but it's typically going to be the case, provided conditions are met. And in this case, we got to see if there even is a closing high set, not just a swing high that was set. The closing high is going to be the important part. So that 103.1. Closures above 96,866, so basically $97,000. Momentum will be pointed to the upside. I would expect this to be somewhere around $100,000 when the Monday candle opens, and we will follow up on Monday. And, bulls want to see some continuation right from here, in my opinion. And I'd want to see that start to develop in this next week and the following week after. But otherwise, the bulls risk failure in this area if there is any failure to get continuation up and above the all-time high. Then I would be looking for, some consolidation, possibly a deeper correction. That's not a guarantee, though. All right, let's go ahead to the 4 hour and just poke around in some lower term time frames here. Bitcoin trying to try to recover and hold above the basis band here. That, of course, is the 20 simple moving average. You can see it's pretty clear here that if we were going to see any move back below 104, pay attention to the lower first, anywhere below the 103,200, right around that 103.1. By the way, if price pushes down towards it, it will start to line up with the 103.1 over here. Then we start looking down towards the low here, 102 to 102.1, and then the bottom side of the range on expansion into the bottom side supports here. Be very aware on any expansive break of this and any expansive break of the low. Then we're either already testing down or will. And in this case, we can kind of compare that to what we're seeing on momentum here. It's essentially 103 is the pivot for the 4 hour. So bulls got about a $1,100 lead over that particular pivot for momentum. Big thing is weekends kind of up in the air, right? We've seen how posts can affect some of the price, lower liquidity, professional traders not really trading as much, and can sometimes be volatile and sometimes be very, very quiet. So just keep your eyes peeled this weekend. The other thing that I would check on, and that is, so the 12 hour here. The 12 hour is going back into a compression as it stands right now because Bitcoin has done what? Well, once it broke down into the bearish half of the bands, came up and retested them and has been retesting them ever since. If we do see them regained, in this case around the 105 region, then we can start entertaining a trip back to the 106. I would imagine that if it doesn't happen in this 12-hour candle, but maybe happens after, I would expect the upper first to line up with the 106 region. Lower first riding right at that 1272, and then we see the lower second starting to curl up. So, any kind of 12-hour closes below the lower second, expansion into support, would need to see expansion below support and breaking down below the low there at 100,377 or so. Then I'd be looking for that move to get started in earnest towards that 98 to 95, where the 96 pivot is kind of right in the middle there. And to the upside, if we do start to see the 106 region regained, we've got the upper second currently at about 108, and then you start looking like 108 to 110, where the upper third is, and then kind of gauge it from there for the 110 to 112 region up here. Any kind of closures on the 12-hour will give you the bias, especially above the 109,360 here, would give you the bias that this high up here is going to get tested around the 110,830 region and the all-time high in expansion. So that might be something to pay attention to, the 12-hour as it relates to the daily. Especially if the 12 hour starts to get moving, we'll see likely follow through with the daily. So that's pretty much it for today. Yeah, there's not too much else to explain. There's been really no changes other than we got what we were looking for, the downside. We played out one of the scenarios that we talked about, and that was a swing of the primary support area of interest at the 101 200 area. Got even the swing of the low there at 100,700. Nice bounce up, close above 104 in the subsequent daily. So let's see if it holds. Back below 104 in the lower term time frames. Just pay attention. That's all. But yeah, I will wish you all a wonderful weekend, a wonderful morning, afternoon, and evening, no matter where you are in the world. Please trade safe. And of course, as always, stay safe. With all of that being said, Landy out. Take care.